Hello everyone and welcome to the I Hate Everything Best and Worst of 2018 Movie Awards, or whatever we want to call it. So it's that time of the year. I've nearly crept into February. It's taken me a long time because I've just had so many movies to catch up on, but I might as well throw my hat into the ring. So before we start, let me just explain my rules to this. I don't want to keep this going on and on and on because this is 50 plus movies I've got to briefly talk about. So if it's a movie I've talked about before in the past or on Sardonicast or something like that, I will mention that and we'll have links or whatever. You can go find that so I don't have to keep repeating myself. And if the movie is something I plan to cover in the future, aka most of the superhero movies I plan on talking about again, I'll be very brief with those and we'll just move on so we can get to the good stuff. Not that there are no good superhero movies, but you know what I mean. I'd like to quickly thank the people of Twitter for choosing what my head is for this episode. I thought that would be a funny idea to let them choose what my head should be. I'm going to regret this, but it's going to change with every movie I go through, so this is going to be 50 plus heads. So let's just start with the worst and go through up to my favorite. So let's start with the worst movie of the goddamn year. The worst movie I saw anyway. Number 53, Selfie from Hell. By the way, I'm attaching one-word reviews alongside every one of these movies just to kind of summarize my feelings on it. I put myself to the test, gave myself a challenge. So my one-word review for Selfie from Hell was nauseating. I think I saw this way back in January of 2018, so I can barely remember anything about it, aside from it being exceptionally amateur, incredibly boring, like just next level boring, full of all of the tropes and cliches that will drive anyone crazy about horror movies, even horror movie fans. I don't think any movie with the name Selfie from Hell should be able to get away with something like that. If you opt to have the word selfie in your title, you opt to be on my worst of 2018 list at the very bottom of it. Number 52, Show Dogs. Dog Talked about this before. The Cloverfield Paradox. Talked about this on Sardonicast, but what an embarrassing Netflix original. Trying to peddle some stupid throwaway script and pass it off as a Cloverfield movie for some reason. Listen to Sardonicast if you want more on that one. Number 50, Skyscraper. My favorite actor in the world, The Rock, features in the stupid as hell, dumb action skyscraper movie where he climbs a big tower and jumps off it, and it's all very ridiculous and dull and just the worst. God, it's so bad. Kind of entertaining at times. I actually paid money to see it at the cinema. Again, I don't want to stay on this one. I've talked about it before. Number 49, Venom. Worst superhero movie of the year, easily. Planning to go more in depth on my thoughts on this one in the future. Number 48, Predator. Sorry, The Predator. A frustrating sequel that doesn't really understand what makes or made Predator good. It's weirdly reminiscent of Alien Covenant, I think that's what it was called, where they had like the creature designs and like touched familiar ground and territory with the idea of the movie, but in the end it's just kind of a complete mess. Tonally all over the place. I don't know why every action movie has to also be a comedy now. Like why can no action movies just be serious? Why can't you take yourself seriously? It's about an alien that's coming down and slaughtering people. Why is that funny? It didn't really have anything interesting or entertaining in it for me. A total waste of the IP, a waste of time, no valuable characters, barely any scenes of note. It's almost a parody of itself in terms of Shane Black kind of movies. It's what like SNL might do a skit on, but with a $200 million budget or whatever it is. I was very disappointed with it. I expect better from the director, but I guess that's the state of blockbusters in 2018. Most of them were absolutely terrible. Number 47. Ready Player One. I expect so much more from Steven Spielberg. I know it's kind of cool to rag on him nowadays, now that he's kind of an old man and is trying to be relevant, but oof, man. I'd rather he didn't try to be relevant after this one. Ready Player One is already embarrassing enough in book form, so trying to go for that gamer nerdy crowd is just... I can't think of any other word other than embarrassing. I remember just sitting there in the theater and I think Minecraft pops up early on and there's an alien reference and it's just, look, reference. Here's this, here's that. There's no actual substance to this movie aside from the references. Look, there's Master Chief. Look, there's Gears of War guy. Weird Microsoft stuff. What? And it didn't even have the visual charm, the cinematography, that style that Steven Spielberg has. There are little flashes of it here and there, but most of the film is just CG and animated nonsense, and not even in a beautiful art style with amazing art direction. It's all very flashy, in your face, weird, grotesque characters. I never want to see this film again. I found it to be pandering, and I hated the way it thought it was more clever than it really was. Everyone was saying about how awesome the Shining sequence was, and I just thought it was lazy, uninspired, and it just pissed me off. There's no other way to put it. It made me angry. It's probably the most angry I've been in the theater all year in 2018. Number 46, Bird Box. My one-word review was frustrating, because Bird Box does admittedly have some kind of decent ideas and some decent performances. It's got a good enough cast, but my real issue was the story. There were too many moments where you're just like, what are the rules of these creatures? If you don't know, the movie's about these Lovecraftian creatures kind of appear and they make people commit suicide if you look at them. So everyone has to cover their eyes and hide and all that. And the story is kind of aimless. It's cutting between flashbacks and going down the river plot. It was a very Netflix movie to me. I don't understand why it was so popular, why it was so successful, according to Netflix and everything they were saying about it. But it was just kind of a worse version of A Quiet Place, which is a film which is on this list, which I didn't really like either, but at least that film was more consistent with what it set up. And again, it just felt like familiar territory, lots of repetitive ideas and characters and scenes, and it doesn't really go anywhere. A lot of the film is kind of these moronic characters you don't really care about, all being idiots together and making stupid decisions. And there's one character who is portrayed as being the villain kind of asshole, but I was sat there agreeing with everything he was saying. So when everything inevitably does go wrong, it's just kind of well, you all deserve it, and I don't care about any of you, and this movie's dumb. Number 45, Halloween. I really like the original Halloween. It's a freaky movie. I'm quite easy to scare if you just put a little bit of effort in. All it takes is a little tiny bit of effort for me, and I will inevitably get a bit scared. But Halloween isn't really going for that. It's half comedy, half slasher film, and again with the pointless comedy, misplaced comedy. And some of the comedy isn't even bad. It's just you're left scratching your head wondering, why is this in a Halloween movie? I just thought it was exceptionally tame, dull. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was so bored when watching it. I actually left it running, went downstairs because I was watching it on my PC, went and grabbed my Nintendo Switch, took it upstairs, and was just playing Octopath Traveler while it was on because I was so bored. I gave it 30-40 minutes, and I saw it was 2 hours long, and it's come on, guys. This is so uninteresting, and there are only a couple scenes that really piqued my interest, and it's all to do with murders. There was some nice practical effects. The score was interesting now and again, but it bugs me so much when this forced comedy just tears you out of the atmosphere, tears you out of the film, and I kind of wish I never watched it because I got nothing out of it. Number 44, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. What a weird film. Another bloated, unnecessary sequel. I'm easy on dinosaur movies, so I know a lot of people hate this film a lot more than I probably do, because I'm easy to please. If you put this big, dumb CG dinosaur just, running around the screen, I'll be a bit happy. And it's a weird one because it's kind of two movies in one. I've talked about it before. It had some memorable scenes, a couple of good shots here and there, really bad characters, a really stupid story. It's just Hollywood nonsense at its finest. Wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Number 43, Sherlock Gnomes. Pathetic. Go watch my search for the worst on it. Or don't, I think it's been claimed. Number 42, The Happy Time Murders. I called this one wasteful because I think buried deep within a lot of the elements here there is a good movie, or at least a good idea for a movie. They were trying to go for a Who Framed Roger Rabbit kind of tone, which is comedic combined with the absurdity of a cartoon, or in this case, puppets being these creatures that also inhabit the world alongside humans. But it's yet another movie where the humor completely drags it down. So I think the story was okay if you just take out all the humor. Elements of the story were fine. It's just they needed a more capable comedic writer. They needed a lot of reworks on this material to get it into a state that would be at least entertaining. So I don't really remember even laughing once, which it's billed as a comedy. Melissa McCarthy is one of the main characters, who is as irritating and embarrassing as ever. I kind of liked the main character when he wasn't being funny. I liked the voice actor for him. I thought he did a good job. Some of the puppets were cute, some of the gags were fine, but mostly forgettable. Just wasted opportunity, wasted the puppets, wasted the visual effects. Didn't have enough charm or style to justify what it was going for. I can't believe it even got made, to be honest. I guess it only got made because Melissa McCarthy is in it, and I guess she gets butts in seats. 41, Mowgli, Legend of the Jungle. Why? So Andy Serkis directed this Jungle Book movie, which I think Universal Pictures funded, but then Netflix bought, so it's on Netflix now. And I watched it at like 1 a.m. one night. And first of all, the most striking thing is how horrifying the CG is for these creatures. Because unlike the Disney Jungle Book movie, the remake one that Jon Favreau directed, that movie at the very least had a pretty decent character design. Like the animals, they looked like animals, and they were personified in such a way where it wasn't too human-like, too creepy, whereas Legend of the Jungle takes it a step too far, and you can actually see the human faces within these animals, and it is so distracting. Let alone the story just being very odd, seemed to lack focus. I know it's supposedly based more around the original material, but it had no charm, no wit, and I just couldn't get over how grotesque it looked. It really did scream of a film that came out or was finished years ago. Can't say I recommend it to anyone. Poo-poo, go away. Number 40, Rampage. LOL. My boy Dwayne is back with his video game adaptation. I think it's based on a video game. Yeah. About a giant gorilla that fights a giant crocodile or something. It was fine. I didn't find it offensive. It was 50% boring, 50% dumb. Schlock in its purest and finest. Number 39, Pacific Rim Uprising. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon, and not in a good way, like one of the bad ones. I've talked about this before. Not worth watching. Number 38, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Totally inessential. Was bored to tears while watching it. I'll talk about this more in the future. 37, Slice. So Slice is this little indie movie about like a world where zombies or ghosts are inhabiting the same world as people, and it's like an obvious metaphor for a bunch of things. I found it unremarkable, pretty dull. I kind of saw what they were trying to go for, but it either didn't have the budget or development necessary to make it an interesting story. It has the guy from Stranger Things in it, who's okay. It was just mostly bleh, fine. Number 36, The Meg. The Meg would have been so bad that it's good if not for how much it pandered to China, which really gets on my nerves. Their entire characters, entire places that they go to that are specifically built around just pandering to China, and I just, it's so obvious to me, and it's so cynical and greedy, and it just pisses me off. Like, is a giant shark not enough? Everyone in the world can appreciate a giant shark. It's got its moments, it's got some dumb stuff that's kind of entertaining. It wasn't quite as boring as some of the previous dumb blockbusters I've mentioned, and it's the most 2018 move. It's Hollywood say like, oh, how can we make a movie about a shark scary again? I know, let's just make it big. Bigger, scarier, bigger equals scarier, big, huge shark. Adapt some random novel and just completely take everything out of it that is interesting and just make it about a giant shark. There we go. Done. $500 million domestic. God damn, this is the best movie ever. 28 sequels. Whatever, just this movie. Number 35, Tag. Mediocre comedy. Talked about it before. Number 34, Cam. Amateur. Get it? Get it? You'd get it if you knew that the film was about online kind of titty streamers. And it's like a horror thing. It's about a streamer who has an impersonator kind of take over her streaming account. It's a little cute Netflix original, which has a lot of good ideas, some pretty decent performances in it, but I found the horror elements to be way too on the nose, way too head-scratchingly dumb. I know people have got a lot more out of this film than I did. I thought it was okay, a neat little idea, worth watching on Netflix if you've got an hour and a half free. 33, A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place is okay. Too often it had me wondering, what? Or why? But my biggest issue, aside from the kind of nitpicks about the rules of the way the world works with these kind of aliens that hunt you down if you make noise, was more how I felt the film was building up a nice momentum as it was going along, and right as it was getting really exciting and I was really into it, it just kind of fizzles out and drops the ball. To me, it was just kind of a less interesting Tremors. If you don't know, Tremors is about these giant worms in the desert that kind of hone in on you based on if you're walking on the ground, hence making vibrations, leading it to you, yada yada yada. Really similar concept, but without any of the charm or creativity I think was required to really make this either a good horror movie or a good interesting creature movie, because I didn't find it particularly scary or tense because they show you the creatures in the first few minutes of the movie, so it's not a mystery as to what they look like or what they're capable of particularly. And I could see why one might find it tense, but for me I was just too confused as to the setup and rules of the world that it was just bugging me too much and was pulling me out of the film. Number 32, Deadpool 2. I've got my issues with Deadpool. I'll talk about that in the future, but I thought it was fine, laughed a couple times. Not really for me. 31, Black Panther, 7 Oscars. I'll be talking about this in the future. 30, Solo, a Star Wars story, a Han Solo prequel. Great. I didn't get much out of Solo. I thought Aldrin Ehrenreich, or whatever he was called, Albin Bellet, whatever. He did a good job as Han Solo. I wasn't mad about Lando. I thought he seemed like he was doing a caricature almost. Has some really bad dialogue. The one that I constantly make fun of all the time within my friend group is, "What family are you from?" "I don't have a family, I work alone." "Huh, so you're solo." "Let's call you Han Solo." Like that level of ridiculous, unnecessary dialogue, just overly explaining stuff that didn't need to be explained. Like, come on. It's largely inoffensive, has some decent scenes, a really good score actually by John Powell, who I will always like for his How to Train Your Dragon score. Everyone's already gone on about how dark and dreary the movie is and how hard to see it was. I've only seen the film once. I have no urge to watch it again, but that's what I remember, is really struggling to see the creatures and just appreciate the shots of certain scenes. It's okay. I would have 100% preferred to see the Lord and Miller versions. If that had been completed, I'm sure that would be a classic by all regards. Basically everything they've worked on otherwise has proven to be so it's a shame. And a lot of wasted ideas and potential, just completely unnecessary. I don't want to see prequel movies anymore. I want to see new stuff. 29, Happy as Lazaro. I'll probably get some doo-doo for this one, but it's an Italian sort of indie darling movie about this weird kid, Lazaro, who's like a moron, who's purposefully written to be this totally inessential, inoffensive, living grey goo who does nothing and just wanders through and is helpful to everyone and has no personality. And the story is about the rich kind of abusing the poor on like a tobacco farm. And it has some really good ideas, some really good elements to it. A lot of people have got a lot more out of it than I did, but I found it a bit too long in the tooth for me and kind of messy and unorganized. Number 28, Teen Titans Go to the Movies. Cute. I know I'm supposed to hate this franchise of Teen Titans Go, or whatever it's called, movies or show or whatever it is. I thought it was fine. I'll talk about it more in the future because it's a superhero movie. Number 27, Aquaman. My guilty pleasure of the year? God damn, I was entertained by this stupid ass movie. And not just because Aquaman was in it. Really, it was, if I'm being as objective as I can, it was really dumb. Stuff we've seen before, elements of a story we've all seen before, but it was too weird and creative. I've never seen an entire movie based underwater in such a ludicrous, eccentric way. I really liked a lot about the directing, and the action scenes were fun and goofy, and it had a light-hearted tone. Loads of really bad acting. Loads of just terrible stuff about it overall, but I don't know, it's probably my favorite one of these DC movies that have come out in this new era of the DCCU? DC Cinematic, yeah. Wow, that rolls off the tongue. Yeah, I was crying with laughter when it ended. It's just nuts. It's absolutely bonkers. It is way too long, super bloated, full of unnecessary scenes. But I actually like it a lot more than a bunch of the what do Marvel call them? Phase 1 movies. Like, I way prefer it over Thor 1 and 2. It's got way more character, way more energy, way more life to it. It's just so stupid, and I can definitely see why someone might not like that. Number 26, Calibre. A very fine, exciting, tense Netflix movie. Talked about it before. I'd recommend watching that one. 25, Mandy. Mandy had a lot of things going for it. A really good performance from Nicolas Cage. Really unique color palette, lighting, set design, music. It's got some great scenes in it. It's got its moments, but I found that it took way too long to get going, and by the time it did, I was kind of disinterested. But overall, I think it would be worth watching on a big TV. And if you like heavy metal magazine. Now's the part where I gotta put food on the table. So this video was sponsored by these very good headphones. For people who want to have a high-end audio experience for the lowest price, the HD 58Xs are affordable luxury headphones. At only $150, the HD 58X Jubilee is the easiest way to experience high-end audio quality. They've sold over 20,000 of these things, and perhaps the biggest appeal is that you're essentially getting the quality of a $500 headphone for only $150. It has the ideal amount of bass, mids, trebles, and any other complicated sound-related noun that ends in an S. They're really well made, yet lightweight, and overall have really been a joy for me to use. It's genuinely quite nice to be sponsored by a product I actually really like and will be using daily from now until the foreseeable future. I kind of regret spending needless hundreds on other pairs of headphones I've bought in the past when these were available for a fraction of the price that I paid. I obviously use headphones a lot for audio and video editing, listening to music, watching movies and whatnot, and this pair has proven to be really comfortable for long-term use with great audio quality. They're really comfy, which is a big deal for me, because if they ain't comfy, they're not going to do the trick for long editing sessions. I actually watched a fair amount of the movies that were featured in this video while wearing these very headphones, and they did the job perfectly. Heck, even my dog likes them. So if you're curious to see how high-end audio sounds for only $150, click the link in the description for the HD 58Xs. 24, 8th Grade. 8th Grade is a charming, very likable movie. There's yet another one of these coming-of-age stories for, you guessed it, someone in 8th grade kind of ending their year and going through everything that someone of that age goes through. I did appreciate how they got the attention to detail right. It actually did seem like the characters were the age they were supposed to be. However, I thought the heart of the movie were scenes that revolved around the main character and her dad. Those were easily the best moments for me. There was some genuine heart, genuine affection. There are a lot of good techniques used in the movie, a lot of good camera work. The score was good. The writing overall was very good. The performances mostly were good. I liked the message of the movie. I think a lot of people around the age of being in 8th grade, whatever that is, it's what, 13? We don't have grades in the UK, so I'm not entirely sure. Are going to get a lot out of this movie. It's the kind of thing I probably would have got a lot out of when I was a bit younger. It's a little bit harder for me to relate to being, not from America and having, different kind of way of interacting with each other, and social awkwardness of it all and everything is all very different depending on where you're from. But still, nonetheless, I found it to be very entertaining, very charming, funny at times. I liked how Bo Burnham used YouTube in the story in a non-pandering, kind of self-jerking off way that like the Smosh movie or Shane Dawson's movies have done. It's clearly a labor of love, and I very much enjoyed it. 23. Upgrade. Upgrade is a surprising little indie film, which you might not even think is an indie film, but it actually has a really small budget considering what they managed to achieve with it. But it's kind of familiar in terms of its story and the things that happen in it. It's I won't spoil anything that happens, but it has some really good action scenes. I was struggling to get involved in the movie because a lot of the dialogue and where it's going is very obvious in such an overt way that once you remove that out, there isn't really much left of interest. It's all very, bog standard stuff up until the real science fiction elements come in, where the story's basically Siri is controlling someone. Like if you took Siri from your phone and put it in your brain, imagine what that could do to someone. It's a neat idea. Lots of really good scenes in it. I had some issues, yet again, with misplaced comedy. I think it didn't work with how kind of grounded and serious the movie was up until that point. It didn't make much sense to me. It's definitely worth a watch, though. I'm sure fans of action and goofy, violent science fiction will enjoy it too. 22. 22nd of July. That was not intentional. So this is the movie about the horrific shooting in Norway that took place. It's a Netflix movie. And much like Paul Greengrass's other movies, it kind of fits into the same playbook of showing a horrible event as it occurred, how it occurred, and most importantly, the response to it and how people took action to make sure it never happened again. At times, it does feel kind of nasty and exploitative, but then I don't know how you can actually make a movie about this without the violence being involved at all. I did find it morbidly fascinating throughout. I thought it was well made, lots of very good performances, and I don't think films about, harsh subject matter should be discouraged just because it might be considered distasteful. I think you can tell stories about, or, show recreations of horrific events in a way that does add context, add some kind of message or meaning to it. I think it succeeds more than it fumbles for the most part, but I can definitely see why one might not want to watch it ever, or may find it disrespectful or distasteful. 21, Black Klansmen. Really enjoyable movie. Well directed, a lot of good choices in terms of music and editing and casting, very good performances throughout. Really interesting movie, a nice brisk pace to it all, and it has a nice little kind of gut punch at the very end, which I thought was quite poignant. It was kind of missing a certain X factor that really made me feel passionate about it in any major way, but I think it's definitely worth a watch. 20, Searching. I've talked about Searching before. It's a clever movie only using phone screens and computer screens and, iPhone cameras and whatnot to tell a story. It's got some dumb stuff in there, but I think overall, just the presentation of it all is interesting enough to worth watching it. It's unfriended if it weren't worthless. 19, Incredibles 2. I described it as workmanlike as my one-word review. I've talked about this film before, and I was quite positive about it because I do think, in terms of if we're looking at this as a superhero movie of 2018, it's one of the better ones. If what you're going into a blockbuster superhero action movie is what you want, is kind of what the film delivers on it. It does have good action, it's got good music, it's got fantastic animation, great character design, but I think most people have issues with the story. It's not particularly inspired, it has a really bad twist in it. I think most people are in agreement that it would have been a much more interesting decision to, instead of taking the story and directly continuing from The Incredibles 1, literally the second after that film ended, it would have been maybe more interesting to jump 10, 15 years ahead into the future and focus on an older set of characters, maybe make Dash or Violet the main character and give them a new arc to go through, because otherwise all the major arcs from Incredibles 1 have already taken place. Mr. Incredible has had his arc and all the others, so it does feel more like a Saturday morning cartoon. Mostly in a good way, I'd say, but nothing that'll leave you thinking or will impress you in any major way aside from, basic action choreography and stuff Pixar they can just do with their eyes closed at this point. 18, Leave No Trace. Leave No Trace is a lonely movie about a dad and his daughter that don't want to be part of society, so they kind of try and live in parks and places where they won't be found. And the film's just a personal little character study about these two people and how it affects a young person's life as they're being raised outside of society in a way that they maybe don't want to be a part of. I thought it was really interesting for the most part. It is very slow, very plodding. I actually watched it in 2 parts. Not intentionally, but I had to go do something halfway through, so I left it paused, and I feel like that was a good way of watching it because it made the pacing feel more brisk to me. But I thought the performances were very good. There are some really good scenes. I liked the overall themes of the movie, the message of the movie, and for those that are after something that might leave them thinking, I would recommend it. 17, Widows. Widows is a very slick, exciting heist movie from the director of 12 Years a Slave. It's not quite like that movie, it's a lot more goofy, but it does take itself seriously. There are elements of it that are kind of dumb at times, but it's just too well made. The score by Hans Zimmer is very good. Every performance is excellent. It has one of my favorite villains of the year, a truly menacing, frightening villain. Clearly this was made by someone who is an expert in visual storytelling, and a lot of it is a joy to watch, so I would definitely recommend it. Number 16, Avengers Infinity War. You're probably surprised that it's so high, but I really enjoyed it. I've seen it 2 or 3 times, amazingly, and I'll talk about it more in the future, but I can't believe how much I like that movie. 15, Black Mirror Bandersnatch. So this Netflix choose your own adventure movie just kind of came out of nowhere right at the end of the year, and it's a really fresh, unique, creative way of telling a story. You do kind of get to choose what you want to happen at points in the story on Netflix. I'm sure most of you know what the movie's about. If not, just Google it. But there are some very well directed and edited sequences. Most of the acting is pretty good. It's the typical Black Mirror twisty and turny writing that I'm sure a lot of you watching or listening really enjoy already, but in a more open kind of crazy creative setup. It's hard to even talk about without I just recommend go and play it, watch it. What the hell is it? You go through it and it's just an entertaining as hell experience. 14, First Man. First Man is Whiplash director's latest movie. It's a very clean, expertly made film about the moon landing So any fans of NASA and space movies and space exploration kind of movies will like this kind of thing. A lot of really interesting uses of sound and cinematography. It's almost so perfectly made that it's kind of dull at points. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's so well made overall. This doesn't quite reach the heights as something like Whiplash or La La Land, but it's another really solid entry for this director. 13, The House That Jack Built. This is one of those contentious movies, Lars von Trier's latest thing that he's done, but I really enjoyed it. It's about a serial killer with OCD who's kind of describing his journey, the journey of being a murderer. Lars von Trier is very hit or miss for me. I find he can be very annoying, very up his own bum sometimes, and this film is certainly pretentious at times. It can be irritating, but I thought the structure of the movie was really interesting, and the way it kind of comes to a conclusion towards the end is really satisfying and something I wasn't expecting. I liked a lot of the gore and the dumb elements, and I found it really funny. It's one of the funniest films of the year for sure. Whether it be intentional or not, it doesn't matter. My enjoyment of the film was quite high. I would say it is way too long, and it can easily get on your nerves if you're not in the right mood, or if Lars von Trier just doesn't gel with you. But it's weird, different, and certainly unique, so, something this unique and strange is worth watching just for that alone, even if you hate it. Number 12, Mission Impossible Fallout. I actually lowered the ranking of this movie compared to how it was earlier in the year because I'd seen it twice in the cinema and thought it was so thrilling. But watching it at home, it wasn't quite on the same level. I started to see way more issues with it. And especially with the visual effects, a lot of the CG just does not look as good as it did in the cinema for some reason. I've never experienced that before. But I think, I've talked about it before. It's really exciting, really well-made action movie. Stunt work is impeccable, especially in a landscape where we are getting stupid stuff like Skyscraper and CG fests like Black Panther and Infinity War. It is nice to see something with weight, grounded realism, and it felt very much like it was straight out of the 80s, but with a even bigger budget and, effects work and everything that comes with it. Number 11, First Reformed. Now, everywhere lists this film as coming out in 2017, but I'm gonna say it came out in 2018 just for the sake of this video. It's been nominated for an Oscar, so whatever. Really thought-provoking, slow but intentional movie, quite shocking at points, fantastic characters all round. Great performances from everybody. It left quite an impression on me. It got me thinking, which is always a good sign. Certainly not for everybody, but I would heavily suggest to at least give it a try. Number 10, SpiderMan Into the SpiderVerse. What a load of fun. Just makes me feel like a kid again. It's the kind of superhero movie I love to see. It's got the incredible animation, the style, the substance, the witty writing that I was very scared about, that was going to be annoying in terms of the comedy. I can find it can be very hit or miss with these superhero movies, but I absolutely loved every second of it. I'm so glad an animated movie with such a unique visual presentation has such wide appeal thanks to just including Spider-Man, and it's not a retelling of a Spider-Man story we've seen time and time again. It's with a new Spider-Man. It's in a new story with a bunch of new characters while playing on Spider-Man and everything we know and love about him already. I'll talk about this movie more in the future, but just fantastic. Number 9, Hereditary. Hereditary felt very classic to me. It felt like I was watching a classic in the making. The atmosphere and tone was palpable. I really loved the slow build and some really strong performances. I thought it was scary, really well shot, really good writing, really good use of visual metaphors, and there are so many little details and elements that you'll notice more on a second viewing. There's just a lot to it. It's very dense with information. It has its dumb things about it, but it's just too enjoyable. It's too striking. And it's not the typical kind of horror movie. This is the kind of stuff I want to be seeing. Number 8, Annihilation. Another horror movie that left me really genuinely frightened. The ending of the movie deeply disturbed me in a way I hadn't had a film do in a very long time. Not even in a way I can even really describe. It was just such a visceral experience for me and has so many creative ideas in it, so many disturbing ideas in it. My biggest issue was the structure of the movie. I think that took some of the punch away and the mystery away from what would otherwise be really engaging the whole time. I really liked how moldable the meaning of the movie is in terms of how there is a lot to get out of it if you choose to look for it. You can just enjoy it in terms of a kind of scary, weird horror film, but there's also a lot more to delve into in terms of what the characters are actually going through and what it all means and what you took about this weird place that they're in, and it's just a really unique, weird film. Number 7, The Sisters Brothers. This film came out of nowhere and bombed, apparently. Nobody saw it. A really fantastic western featuring Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly in the lead roles. It's got a great cast, this movie, and everyone's really good in it. I could tell from the opening sequence that it was going to be a film that I liked just from how they present this gunfight. It's just a really creative, fresh kind of way of displaying that kind of thing. I like the story, I like the characters, I really like the score. I thought the music was awesome. It was shot really well, the set design and costumes, everything was top notch. I can't believe it's flown under the radar and more people need to see it. Number 6, Isle of Dogs. Isle of Dogs is very, very charming. I absolutely adore stop motion. I think Wes Anderson's style is perfectly suited for animation. Most people enjoyed Fantastic Mr. Fox before, and I actually like this one more, I think. I just like how it celebrates life. It celebrates something as simple as pets, but in a very charming, quirky, weird way that most people should be able to enjoy. Excellent score, excellent voice acting, very good animation. I just left the theater feeling jazzed and happy after watching it, so that's always a good thing. Number 5, Roma. Alfonso Cuarón's latest movie is a real passion project, and it shows a really intimate and tragic story about a simple servant and just her life and everything she goes through. It has a lot more going on than at first you might think, especially if you read up about it after the movie's done. There's so much thought put into every little detail, from the camera work to the set design to the blocking of everything. It's just a master at work with sequences and scenes that I found quite difficult to watch in a good way. And I think the special effects have gone completely unnoticed because of how seamless they are. You wouldn't even think about how some of the things they achieve in the movie are through special effects and stitching different shots together to give it this flowing beauty to everything. But it's just a wonder. I think it's exceptional. I think it's very, very good and easily one of the best films of the year. I'd be happy if it won any of the Oscars that it's been nominated for. Number 4, They Shall Not Grow Old. So Peter Jackson made a documentary about World War I, with the gimmick being, because there has to be a gimmick if it's Peter Jackson and cinema. The gimmick being that a lot of the documentary uses recolored World War I footage, which is really striking. Really impressive, but that wasn't even the most impressive part to me, because I was reading some people found that kind of distasteful or bad, but I didn't see it in that way at all. I thought it was all for the sake of the story they were telling. It's a very well made documentary and quite unlike any others I've seen before, just in terms of how it was presented. It wasn't typical kind of camera setup interviewing, veterans or whoever, cut to clip type thing. The whole movie never breaks, showing just pictures and clips, and there's no narration aside from actual clips of veterans and people involved with the war who were just stitched together to kind of provide a narrative, starting with the very beginning where everyone was joining in World War I to go in to fight and how naive everyone was, all the way to the end where they were coming home and the emotions run wild. It does start off a bit slow, I'll admit. It takes a little bit to get going, but I think the payoff is just the contrast in how horrific and how graphic things do get as they go along. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. The movie does not shy away from showing death, destruction, utter chaos, and it's very real, obviously, because it is real footage. And my one-word review was important, because I think it's something we should not try and forget about. It's something we need to remember and respect, and it's the kind of thing that I would have really liked to have seen when I was learning about World War I at school. And not in a kind of gimmicky, overly schooly way. I just mean I think it does a really good job of making you feel really and empathize with what a soldier went through back then, and really what it was like to be in one of these trenches or be in just this horrible situation. And it has a lot of heart. It's really well edited, and I think it does its job very well. Number 3, Suspiria. Suspiria is amazing. I can't remember the last time a film actually made me just say, wow. Well, I didn't say it like that. It was more like, whoa. No, it wasn't like that either. You get the point. I'd heard rumors and rumblings about certain elements of this film. I still haven't seen the original, but I'm sure this is very different. It probably has the best editing of the year. There are entire sequences that are breathtaking, mostly down to the editing and what they're able to achieve with it. I found it to be horrifying because of how nightmarish they're able to make it, and I mean quite literally nightmarish, as in I watched it in the dark with all the lights off because obviously it's a horror movie, and there are scenes where I felt like I was losing my mind. I actually felt like I was asleep and in a nightmare, because it really does capture how that feels to be totally lost and overwhelmed with all these images, and it's just so well directed, so well edited, very well acted. The prosthetics and makeup are all fantastic. I was very impressed. There are lots of little secrets and things I will not spoil that I would love to talk about, but there's just so much to appreciate about it. The score is very good as well. I liked just about everything about it. I think it's a film that will only get better with subsequent rewatches, so I can't wait to show this to people. I just thought it was brilliant. Number 2, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. The Coen brothers are possibly my favorite directors, so it's almost guaranteed I'm going to enjoy anything I do, and especially when it's a Western. They seem to understand the time period very well, and this collection of 4 or 5 short stories, I can't remember right now, is surprisingly thought-provoking. Well, not surprisingly, considering their track record, but I got a hell of a lot out of the short stories. I'm not normally a fan of anthology-type movies. I find they can be totally torn down, even if one of them is bad, because if you've got 4 or 5 stories in a movie and one of them sucks, that pulls down a fifth of your movie, potentially. But every one of them has its own morals, its own message, its own different tone and atmosphere. Everyone's going to have a different favorite story. The music was very good. Obviously, all the performances very good. Every technical thing was very good, I thought. It does feel kind of fairy tale-ish, or Aesop's fable kind of thing, because of the way the book opens and just the way it looks and the production of everything. I think about the movie a lot. It did leave an impression on me, and I thought it was superb. Now, my number 1 movie of the year, and this is not intentional. My number 1 favorite movie of the year is The Favourite. Haha, isn't that funny? I don't really want to say anything about the story because I think it's just a film that is worth going in, watching and experiencing it as it is. It is a period piece loosely based on people that did exist, but it does something that I absolutely adore about funny movies, because it's very funny, and not in a typical this is a comedy kind of way, but more in the time period is funny, the way they interact with each other is funny, the dynamics between the characters is what's funny, instead of them, telling typical setup punchline kind of jokes. But I really appreciated how you feel differently about all the major characters at the end compared to how you did at the beginning. Every technical aspect was absolutely on point, but I think the real star of the show was the writing and directing. So just a really beautiful, kind of rustic, accurate, natural feeling to the movie. It all seems very appropriate for what they were going for. It has heart to it. It has real thoughts and opinions to put out there. It makes you feel every type of emotion. It's a masterpiece, and I recommend it to everybody. Gosh, that was a lot of movies, and there were so many I didn't even get to see and missed, which breaks my heart, but I only have so much time. So I hope that was entertaining enough for you. So thanks very much for watching. I'll see you on the next, I was going to say Angry Joe show, but no, video.